Now I come to the basic Foucauldian question. The question that Foucault raised is about the statistics and about the governmental kind of activity. What role statistics plays in the governmentality issue, and that will be the concluding part, which is this, that in his essay on governmentality, Foucault points out that the art of government found fresh outlets through the emergence of the problem of population. Foucault is saying that when if you look into the history of government, then in Europe you find at one stage where you see that population is emerging as an important category for the governmental kind of administration. By population, Foucault means that the people then are enumerated in terms of various kind of attributes. Alright? You see that this, you will understand it immediately if you also need, which you all know, that it was in India the colonial government which took the census statistics. You know that caste and tribe volumes were published during the colonial administration. Now, what is the caste and tribe? That they wanted to kind of enumerate population in terms of caste and tribe, and to understand what are these populations like, and what are their demands, and how to rule them, isn't it? So this is the emergence of population that becomes very important at one point in 17th, 18th century in Europe as a category for administration, the population. So it was through the perception of the specific problems of population, that what is the population mean? Before this, there was only the conception of the people. For instance, in Rousseau's writing and other, you will find that it is defined as people. People is the sovereign, people is this, people is that. Now people is changed into population with a different kind of activities. So the problem of it was through the perception of the specific problems of population that the problem of government finally came to be thought, reflected and calculated outside the juridical framework of sovereignty. And statistics now become the major technical factor of this new technology. The perspective of population rendered possible the final elimination of the model of the family and the recentering of the notion of economy, as statistics had previously worked within the administrative frame, and this in terms of functioning of the sovereignty. What Foucault is saying is that before population emerged, the family was the center around which the government operated. That it is for the welfare of family and so on and so forth. Now, with the emergence of the population, that population with a different kind of characteristics, like poor population, rich population, the population of handicapped, criminal population, and so on. For each you have different kind of prescription, isn't it? That for criminal you have certain kind of governmental policies, for poor you have certain kind of policies, for each body. So when you administration takes place in terms of population, then family gradually disappears. The family is not now, is no more important. Because now the population is important, and that is why the statistician becomes very important, pillars of the government. Because it is a statistician who will give you the information of different kinds of population with specific kind of attributes. Alright. So what is happening is that Foucault is saying family, the elimination of the model of the family and recentering of the notion of the economy. So the notion of the economy is now recentered. Now it is not centered around the family, it is recentered on the notion of the economy. Whereas statistics had previously worked within the administrative frame, and this in terms of functioning of sovereignty, it was now gradually reveals that population has its own regularities. See, this is very important. That as I was telling, that Quintessence said that there is certain regularities of crime and so on and so forth. Now Foucault is saying that it is not that statistics was not used before. Even Roman emperor used statistics, to calculate taxes and that kind of thing. Alright. Foucault is saying that with emergence of population, what the new fact that emerges is that this population has its own regularities. Alright? That certain people will die at certain ages. The life expectancy will be this. There is a certain birth rate taking place. These are the certain regularities that these statisticians discovered about the population. Okay. So it is its own rate of population has its own rate of death and diseases, the cycle of scarcity, etc. Statistics also shows that the domain of population involves a range of intrinsic aggregate effects, phenomena that are irreducible to those of them. That the population aggregate of, like let us say mortality rate or the birth rate, these characteristics of the population, you cannot reduce it at the family level, isn't it? It has to be handled at the level of the population, isn't it? You cannot now reduce it at the level of the family. So what is happening is, such as like epidemics, for instance, levels of mortality, then ascending spirals of labor, wealth, and lastly it shows that through the shifts and activities, other activities, etc., population has specific economic effects. Statistics, by making it possible to quantify the specific phenomenon of population, also shows that this specificity is irreducible to the dimension of family. In other words, prior to the emergence of population as a category, population is an important category, it was impossible to conceive the art of government except on the model of the family. From the moment when population appears irreducible to the family becomes secondary importance or of secondary importance compared to population as an element internal to the population. No longer a model, but a certain kind of component of the total kind of population. This is the way, with the help of statistics, the theme of population unblocks the field of art of government. The population also comes to appear above all else as ultimate end of government. Interest considered as the interest of the population, regardless of what the particular interest and aspiration may be of the individuals who compose it. This is the new target and the fundamental instrument of the government of population. The birth of new art, or at any rate, a range of absolutely new tactics and new ethics. Nearer home, we have a different instance. Now come to India. Nearer home, we have a different instance of the way of quantification and enumeration have been employed by the colonial state. Beginning from the cones, Bernard Cones, you see there is a book called Anthropologist Among the Discovery. Bernard Cohn essay called The Census and Objectification in South Asia. Very good essay, you should read this. Where he showed how this instrument of data gathering creates by its logic and form a new sense of category. That this Cohn shows that the collection of senses by itself creates certain new categories. Category identity in India, which in turn creates condition for new strategies of mobility and politics. The classificatory discussion of his work has been carried forward by many scholars. The vast amount of quantification and statistics generated under colonial rule, though was partly utilitarian, but they gradually become more important part of the illusion of bureaucratic control and a key to the colonial imaginary, in which countable abstractions created the sense of controllable indigenous reality. That it created its own reality, which was not the real India. The role of numbers in the complex information gathering apparatus, such as the colonial one in India, had two sides, as scholars have pointed out. The one side may be described as justificatory, it is a justificatory side. The other is the disciplinary side, that it is to the discipline the population. Justificatory in the sense of arguing and testing, also for major social and resource-related policies with innovation, whereas the more interesting is the disciplinary dimension of the statistic. There the argument is that body counts create not only types and classes, but also homogeneous bodies. See this is an important thing, that body counts, then when you count bodies, you abandon the individual properties. You may create a kind of a type of body which can be called as homogeneous bodies. Body count creates not only types and classes, but also homogeneous bodies within categories. Because number by its nature flattens idiosyncrasies and creates boundaries around those homogeneous bodies. Since it performatively limits their extent, in the latter regard, statistics are to bodies as social types, but maps are statistics are to bodies and social types, but maps are to territories. That to bodies and social types, like maps are to territories. Territories are much more kind of uneven and so on and so forth. Maps flattens. The maps flatten and enclose. So the link between colonialism and Orientalism, for example, is the most strongly reinforced not at the locus of classification and individualism, but a locus of enumeration where bodies are counted, homogenized and bounded in their extent. These are the disciplinary. Thus, the unruly body of the colonial subject is recaptured through the language of numbers that allows these very bodies to be brought back, now counted and accounted for the human projects of the state. I may say in passing that with regard to the disciplinary concepts, Foucault's ideas about biopolitics certainly are more relevant since the colonial state shows itself as a part of Indian body politic, while it was simultaneously engaged in reinscribing the politics of the Indian body, especially in its more involvement with others like sati like book swinging, possession rights, and other forms of body malpractice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think there are a lot of interesting similarities and a lot of commonalities between sociology and communications to the audience as an experiences. I think what you mentioned broadly about the idea of why there was a need for empirical verification, why empiricism at all came as a kind of a body of knowledge. I think prior to empiricism, probably the world was, we sort of try to analyze everything in terms of our body. So that's where we sort of, what Quick-Laird and others you mentioned about, people were sort of trying to analyze the circulation of blood and circulation, they're sort of trying to analyze and extend the idea to circulation of coins, and also trying to understand circulation in society. So that's where one idea of communication, that communication is a circulation of ideas. So that's how we began. Later on we realized that that is not enough, we need to verify, physically verify. So that's what the idea of empirical analysis or inquiry came, that we need to verify physically by being present there. And that is where we sort of try to extend the idea. Interestingly, what you mentioned about Columbia University, one of the major founder of Columbia University was Legasper. And Legasper, an Austrian who was invited by Rockefeller Foundation and subsequently moved to Columbia, starting Applied Bureau of Social Research, and established that. And that is also the time when Rockefeller had a series of radio stations and television stations in the US. So the idea was that he was being told categorically that he needs to do a lot of audience analysis as a listener surveys for radio. And this is where he actually, what we study mostly, quantitative techniques were basically developed by Legasper during 1920s and 30s. Of course, there's a long history why he finally moved out of communications. In fact, all the classic scholars like Hobland, Legasper, those who were actually the initial pioneers in the field of communication, finally moved out of communication. They realized that they need to go back to their own subsequent disciplines like psychology and sociology, the way communications moved. But the amount of research which Legasper did and subsequently took, probably it also polarized. There is a very interesting book all of you must be knowing about called Authoritarian Personality, which is actually an invitation to Theodore Adorno, who was actually in exile in the US, in New York. So Legasper, because he was basically having a European origin, so he was obviously hounded by his epistemology or European epistemology. So he invited, why not my empiricism and Adorno's theoretical insight? We combine together and bring out a masterpiece, and that is called The Authoritarian Personality. It's one of the most classic work ever produced, but however, Adorno resigned after subsequent year and finally withdrew from the collaborative project and said that, look, it is not my any personal animosity against Legasper, but I have my personal difference of opinion with the nature of techniques they use in research. So that is where, Adorno withdrew from the project. But these are the classics which were done, and there are attempts where there is an attempt to bring together. I think one of the classics would be, as some of you are PhD scholars, one of the most classics would be reading Sociological Imagination by St. Wright Mills. I think that is a fundamental text which actually clarifies the way you frame your question, that itself will make you to use the techniques. And I think you again should go back, the way you pose question, that question automatically will generate what kind of method you will use and techniques. I think if you are clear about your question, half of your work is over. So that is what in research you should be very clear. That the way you frame questions, there is one passage I remember vividly about C. Wright Mills, where he says that nowadays people are, nowadays something I forgot, nowadays it starts with something. Then the fundamental question to that passage, Depends. Suppose you ask a question, how many people? Who are the people? I mean, that itself is an empirical question that needs to be verified. So that is where the kind of techniques which you use, that is what makes it very in research. I think that's what. Now I'd like to quickly have a few questions so that we need to go back for a deeper. So any quick question, not 2, 3, 4 questions, so that you'll have plenty of time in the next. Yes, some quick questions.
A little clarification about the thing that you said mortality is now being handled or being taken care by the population, not by the family. Little explanation of this point, because I was not able to understand. I feel that family plays an important role there. But you said something, it has been now shifted to the population thing from the family. The family has become something secondary. Can you explain it?
Actually, you know, this was Foucault's kind of idea of government. He was talking about Europe. So you remember that. So he was saying that in Europe the idea of government in the medieval period, let us say, the government was based on the model of the family. That is, model of the family means that like in a family you have a head and there are people who are dependent on you and so on and so forth. So the ruler or the king was the head, and you know he would be surrounded by his dependents. This is one model. Second was the target of the government was also the family. That, well, give them some land, give them some money, take them this, to recruit them for the army and so on and so forth. He said that the important change of the modern government took place when population emerged as an important category. Now, what is the difference between population and family? Foucault is saying that population, it was found through statisticians that population have certain characteristics which cannot be reduced at the level of the family. Why? What are the characteristics? Like say mortality rate. Like for instance in India, let us say, I don't know what is the mortality rate, but let us say India mortality rate is X%. Now this is a characteristics of the Indian population. You cannot reduce it to the family. So if you, let us say I am the government. Now if I want to reduce that, let us say it is very high mortality rate. Many people die. So if I want to reduce the mortality rate as a government, let us say I am the Prime Minister. So I have to tackle it at the level of the population. I cannot tackle it at that. Maybe when I make population, then I say that, well, go to each family and tell them that to drink pure safe water and so on and so forth. But you have to handle it at the level of family. So these are, I said that these are the very various kind of characteristics that was found at the level of the family, like death rate, like birth rate, like epidemics found and so on, which had to be handled at the level of the population. So that problem could not be handled at the level of the family. So that is how the population became important. And consequently, that is why statistics also became important, because to rule properly, I need to know the characteristics of the population, isn't it? If I know that, let us say that there is very low birth rate, then I have to increase the birth rate, so I have to devise certain policies. I should say, like in Russia, you know that when Russia became communist, they had prizes for more children, you know, because they had the low, where the population was quite low in according to their calculation. So the government announces, they used to say a model mother and all that kind of prizes were. Whereas in India we have other kind of problems. So we have policies to control the population. China has the policies for the control of the population.